Coming up on 5 Minute News. West unveils sanctions as Russia advances Ukraine invasion. Ahmaud Arbery killers convicted of federal hate crimes. And Supreme Court formally rejects Donald Trump's fight to protect records. It's Wednesday, February 23. I'm Anthony Davis. The face-off over Ukraine escalated dramatically on Tuesday, with Russian lawmakers authorizing President Vladimir Putin to use military force outside his country, and US President Joe Biden and European leaders responding by advancing sanctions on Russian oligarchs and banks. Both leaders signalled that an even bigger confrontation could lie ahead. Putin has yet to unleash the force of the 170,000 troops massed on three sides of Ukraine, while Biden held back on even tougher sanctions that could cause economic turmoil for Russia, but said they would go ahead if there is further aggression. The measures, accompanied by the repositioning of additional US troops to the Baltic nations on NATO's eastern flank bordering Russia, came as Russian forces rolled into rebel-held areas in eastern Ukraine, after Putin said he was recognizing the independence of the separatist regions in defiance of US and European demands. Speaking at the White House, Biden said the Kremlin had flagrantly violated international law in what he called the beginning of a Russian invasion of Ukraine. Hopes for a diplomatic resolution to the threat of invasion, which US officials have for weeks portrayed as all but inevitable, appeared to evaporate. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken cancelled plans for a Thursday meeting in Geneva with his Russian counterpart, saying it would not be productive and that Russia's actions indicated Moscow was not serious about a peaceful path to resolving the crisis. Meanwhile, the former president Donald Trump called Vladimir Putin a genius after the Russian president made moves to take parts of Ukraine, which Trump referred to as a smart move. 3 white men convicted of murder in Ahmaud Arbery's shooting were found guilty of federal hate crimes on Tuesday in a verdict that affirmed what family members and civil rights activists said all along, that he was chased down and killed because he was black. The verdict, handed down one day before the second anniversary of Arbery's death on February 23, 2020, was symbolic, coming just months after all 3 defendants were convicted of murder in a Georgia state court and sentenced to life in prison. But family and community members viewed the hate crimes trial as an important statement. The case also became part of a larger national reckoning on racial injustice after graphic video of Arbery's killing was leaked online. Arbery's father, Marcus Arbery Sr., bowed his head and shook his fists in quiet celebration as the guilty verdicts were read in the courtroom. He then pressed his hands together in front of his face, as if saying a silent prayer. Arbery Sr. noted that his son used to call him every day, even just to tell his family that he loved them. Defendants Greg and Travis McMichael sat stoically at the defense table as the guilty verdicts were read. When called one at a time before the judge to discuss next steps in their cases, the father and son answered with hushed voices. The McMichaels and their neighbour William Bryan were also found guilty of attempted kidnapping, and the McMichaels were also convicted of the use of a firearm in the commission of a violent crime. To back the hate crime charges, prosecutors showed roughly 24 text messages and social media posts in which Travis McMichael and Bryan used racist slurs and made derogatory comments about black people. US Attorney General Merrick Garland said in an emotional statement that the verdict makes clear that the Justice Department will continue to use every resource at its disposal to confront unlawful acts of hate and to hold accountable those who perpetrate them. The US Supreme Court on Tuesday brought a formal end to former President Donald Trump's request to block the release of White House records sought by the congressional panel investigating last year's deadly attack on the Capitol by a mob of his supporters. Trump and his allies have waged an ongoing legal battle with the House Select Committee, seeking to block access to documents and witnesses. Trump has sought to invoke a legal principle known as executive privilege, which protects the confidentiality of some internal White House communications, a stance rejected by lower courts. The House committee has said it needed the records to understand any role Trump may have played in fomenting the violence that unfolded on January 6, 2021. The committee asked the National Archives to produce visitor logs, phone records and written communications between his advisers. Biden, who took office weeks after the riot, previously determined that the records, which belong to the executive branch, should not be subject to executive privilege. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden has started interviews with top candidates to serve on the Supreme Court in recent days. The White House has said repeatedly that Biden, who has pledged to name the first black woman to the job, would announce his pick before the end of the month. Liberal US Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer plans to retire later this year, giving Biden a chance to put his stamp on the court, even though his choice will not change the balance of power. The 9-member court currently has 6 conservative justices and 3 liberal justices. You can subscribe to 5-Minute News on YouTube with your preferred podcast app. Ask your smart speaker or enable 5-Minute News as your Amazon Alexa flash briefing skill. Subscribe, rate and review online at 5minute.news. 5-Minute News is an Evergreen podcast covering politics, inequality, health and climate, delivering independent, unbiased and essential world news daily.